There we go. We're officially live now.
Ooh, snazzy.
Yeah. All right. So the topic that I proposed today is coaching 101, which is broad.
Just a little.
But what I basically wanted to start getting into of it is just what sort of what the state of the art of knowledge about teaching parkour is at the moment. Sort of like how what are the fundamentals that we know so far? I mean, it's a super young discipline, if you can call it that, or profession. And
yeah,
I think also
it's a young discipline, so it's a super young profession. So
yeah, and I think also part of this project, or part of my aim for this project, was to just sort of collect the knowledge that we do have, because I think there's not really there are some resources, like some qualifications, but it's hard to get to them. And so I think just getting an overview about what we know already, and maybe also what some knowledge is that we should discard and stuff like this. Yeah. Okay, shall we just dive right in?
Here we go.
Let's do this. Okay. So the first thing that I was wondering was what do you think makes up a good parkour trainer or a good parkour coach? And I will answer after you.
Well, I think that what makes a good coach, period, not just parkour, but virtually anything else, ability is, well, not just having the knowledge, not just having the knowledge and experience to actually give the information to somebody else. That's with anything. But I think that would be the number one thing, just having the knowledge and experience to teach what you're even doing in the first place. But with parkour specifically, I think that one of the most important things would be the ability to scale the parkour skills that you're trying to teach to the person or group of people that you're trying to teach it to. And because I think one of the biggest problems with that we face in parkour right now is this perception that it is a extreme sport, and we've got people jumping off of rooftops. Here's your first class, everybody jump off this rooftop to this little tiny rail and then do a front flip. I think parkour specifically, I think it's the ability to teach to the level or to the person or group of people that you're trying to teach it to. That would be the first thing that I would say is one of the most important things for a parkour specific coach.
Yeah, and I mean that it already contains a lot of things. Then the coach has to be able to assess and see where people are at, get a sense of what they're comfortable with, what they are able to do physically, but also psychologically, and then scale the exercises or whatever you're doing in your class to their level and make it fun and challenging and safe, I would say. I really like those three. Yeah.
Yep.
Those three, like, that's for me what a good parkour coach is, and I stole this from Jesse Danger. He can make a class safe, fun, and challenging, and I think that sums it up really well.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. What else? Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I mean, everything on top of that is, of course, you can develop in a lot of different areas, also depending on what kind of people you want to train. Another thing, I think what makes a good, also just culture teacher in general, is a good understanding of what they're trying to teach and why it's important.
Yeah. Yes, most definitely.
Yeah, and having like an explicit sense of that, because if you just practice, you know it's fun, and you know you like it, but also having the understanding of what other people might gain from this, what other people might enjoy in this, which might be totally different from what you enjoy, what inspires you.
Right. And in that, in teaching them the why you're teaching them what you're teaching them, that also comes the need to understand what needs to come before what progressions people need, and are there general progressions that people need, or are there progressions that some people don't need, or some people need to obviously go to regress before they can progress to other things. So yeah, that's that would definitely be number two. That would be number two on my list.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I already have some ideas where we can go next, but before we sort of look into some of the like basic principles that a teacher want to know, I would be interested in what you would consider maybe common mistakes in teaching parkour. I mean, you already alluded to one, which would be to not scale the exercises. But also, what would be maybe some things that people used to do and that's now like outdated knowledge? Is there anything that comes to mind?
Well, as far as the what a parkour coach shouldn't do is, I don't think a parkour. I think that a lot of parkour trainers, at least some of the ones that I've encountered, they teach through demonstration. So they can do the move, but they can't teach the move. So how they do it, but they can't look at their student and say, okay, they're not getting this. How else can I teach it to them? And some coaches only teach through demonstration. They don't teach through or describing it in different ways, picking up different cues that you can give multiple different kinds of people, because different kinds of people are going to get different cues in different ways. So having a very narrow base of how you teach, kinds of people that you teach, I think that's one of the biggest mistakes. Well, I don't know if it's a mistake more than just being inexperienced in training people, teaching people.
Yeah, because you yourself learned it one, but there are 1,000 ways for people to learn what you want to teach them.
Exactly. And everybody's a little bit different as far as the types of cues that you give them. There are some people, there is a fairly large group of people that will immediately understand what to do. If you do the move in front of them, they'll immediately understand what to do. There's a group of people that does that can do that. But that's maybe 1/3 of the population. Most of the rest of the population isn't going to get that.
Yeah.
And you need to be able to teach them.
Absolutely. Yeah. Mark has some. He also had technical problems, but he's following along on the chat. He's also saying that different ways to progress for different movements. Some might be more suited to specific pupils than others, which is basically also what you just said, that you need to teach one movement in a lot of different ways, and you need a lot of different cues just in your sort of toolbox for one.
Right. But that brings up another thing, is that you're going to have to also scale movements to different kinds of people. I mean, if you've got somebody that is extremely lightweight but doesn't have very much upper body strength, versus somebody who is overweight and doesn't have very much upper body strength. You're going to have to teach them something like the top out in two completely different ways. Yes, do they lack upper body? Do both of them lack upper body strength? Yeah, but the light person, you can get them on top of the box and immediately start teaching them to lower themselves down to increase their upper body strength. But the person who's overweight, you're not going to be able to do that because they're not going to learn anything. You have to actually put them on the low box and have them get down by using their legs and bringing themselves down, working the negatives, lowering themselves into cat hangs and that sort of thing. And there's a million different combinations of that as well. Teaching different moves to different kinds of people, not just the way they teach, but also the physical attributes of the person.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, all the stuff we're saying now is fairly generalized, but you always need to have a really good understanding of each individual in your class. And I think it's so for me, it would also be just the basic thing of not having too many students at once. So I would like to have, for me, I have like a maximum of 12 people per teacher.
Yeah, that was and that's still too higher than we allowed. When I had my gym, we only had 10, and if we went over 10, we added another trainer, and even with 2 trainers, we never went over 15.
Yeah, that's perfect.
But yeah, I think that one of the things that's missing a fair amount, and I understand why people don't do it very much because it takes a lot of work, but it takes a lot of work and a lot of knowledge. Screening athletes, screening new people when they come in. So when somebody comes in, you immediately, the very first thing that you do is you put them through a screen of different movements or different mobility drills or different strength tests to be able to find out where they are at the moment, so that you can put them into more or less categories of the kinds of movements they can be taught, and then teach to the level of that group of people. Because if you have a screen, you can have more students in a class because they're all working through that screen. You've screened all of them. You've screened all your clients. You've screened all your athletes, and they're all working on the same level. And then once they pass that level, then you can stick them up in the next level, stick them up in the next level, and so on. There are some gyms that kind of do the same thing, where they have basically level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4 classes, that sort of thing. But what I would say is that it would be a really good idea to screen your students immediately. The instant they come in, you screen them, and you can stick them into different categories there, and then you can level them from there.
Yeah, that's one way to do it. I think there's also some value in not segregating it by skill.
Agreed.
I think that's more a philosophical decision, like how you want to run your business. I think both have value in themselves.
Yeah, and I would actually say that mingling of skill types is what open gym times are for. And with open gym times, I think I guess the only real word to use for it is danger with that, or there are 2 dangers with that. One, you run the risk of creating an elitist culture. If you don't foster a culture in your gym of basically the more advanced students taking the less advanced students under their wing and or encouraging the less advanced students to advance themselves during the gym times, because it ends up being like a skateboarder mentality. Like one person does the biggest move they can and everybody else tries to match them or outdo them, and you get to the point where it's suddenly nobody but the extremely advanced, really confident people are doing anything at all because they're taking up everybody's attention. So there's that danger. The only other danger that you run is the opposite problem, where you have people that are super confident but completely inept, going and trying the biggest moves that they possibly can and slamming themselves in the walls. Creating the culture in the gym or the group that you're in that brings people up but doesn't pump them up. I think that's a balance that you need to strike if you're doing any kind of open gym practice.
Yeah, that's also why I said in the beginning you should be clear on why you want to teach and what you want to teach, and not only in terms of, oh, I want to teach people how to do a cat pass or an arm jump, but do I want to bring out the best in people? Like, do I want to make them into really good athletes, or do I want to make them, like, teach them about cooperation or empathy or I don't know, grit, whatever? Like, where do you want to put your foot? Then dictates how you want to run things, like segregating by skill, or by age even. I mean, here in Berlin, Parkour One, they do a really interesting thing, is that they put all the people from 14 or 15 and then just up in one class for them to learn together and learn from each other. And yeah, there's value in all these approaches, I think.
Agreed. And I think a mix. I really think that a mix is, especially for right now, with as young as the discipline is and as young as the profession of parkour coaching is. I think a mixed approach to it is something that everybody should at least try until they find out what works best for them, or what works best for the majority of the clientele or the majority of the athletes that they're teaching.
Yeah. Also, that's maybe we should do one episode of just like business basics or something like this, because I think that's also a part where a lot of parkour coaches could improve tremendously.
Agreed.
Well, but that's another thing. Okay, so we covered some common mistakes or some outdated knowledge. Oh yeah, one thing that I want to say is I think it's really good as a teacher not to give too many cues at once, because that was something that I did in the beginning.
Oh yeah.
Where I was like, I think I had a good understanding of what people were doing wrong, and I was telling them everything that they're doing wrong and everything that they need to improve.
Right.
And
yeah, it's one thing. You're going to pick up, no matter who it is, you're going to pick up 3 mistakes, and at bare minimum, if not 5 or 10 or 15, if you're getting really nitty gritty into it, biggest one, and tell them to fix that. Get them to fix it. Get them to fix it so that they fix it at least 3 times, and then, only then, maybe give them something else.
Yeah.
So, yeah, slow down.
Absolutely. I think sometimes talking less than more is advisable.
Yeah. That was something that I did as well, and sometimes, unfortunately, I still fall into it. But yeah, it's definitely something that every coach who's really enthusiastic about it really needs to do, is just slow down every once in a while. Just let your athlete process what they need to process, and then give them something else to worry about.
Absolutely. Yeah. Is there anything else that comes to mind when you think of common mistakes in teaching people parkour?
Well, that would be the overcoaching, the overcoaching thing. So there's that kind of overcoaching. There's giving somebody too many cues at a time. That can be disheartening as well as confusing and overwhelming. But you can also run into overcoaching, as in not letting this, like giving the student feedback on every single repetition. You give the student feedback on every single repetition, it's not going to go well.
Yeah.
Because eventually at some point they're just going to stop. Every single time they do a rep, they're going to stop and look for you and like, where are you?
Yeah.
Why aren't you telling me things? Why? What's going on? So you want them to be able to form an independent practice. If you overcoach that way by giving them feedback on every single rep, it's just, again, not going to go well.
Yeah. Yeah.
You have to make them independent.
Yeah, that's a really good point. You basically don't. I like to teach my students in a way that they will not need me at a certain point.
Well, that is your function as a parkour coach. That's your function, to make yourself to make yourself completely unnecessary. Absolutely.
Or at least like in the basic sort of way where they can just go out and explore for themselves and be safe and have fun.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. Martin mentioned another good thing, which is to have too many techniques in one session, especially the first class or the first couple of classes.
Yeah.
Because,
Yeah.
I think
it's just,
as coaches or as practitioners, we like to just drop our knowledge on someone because I was really excited about like teaching them all these cool things.
I'm still really excited.
Yeah. But you just have to like take a step back and realize this is a lot of things to learn, a lot of details and things like this. And I think people just need a lot of time with, and really go deep on the individual techniques and really ingrain them before you move on.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Just in an hour time span, I usually only cover like two, maybe three techniques. And unless the techniques were like arm jumps or like cat to cats, that sort of thing. Because the students just get worn out really, really fast. So you have to change gears. But with like vaulting, with different kinds of vaults or chaining vaults together, 2 or 3 different vaults, and learning how to throw different combos of 3 different vaults, that's more than enough to keep an entire class busy for at least an hour. And but like you said, it allows you to go really deep on the individual techniques and how to get them, how to set them up, how to and how to get them right.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think in the beginning that's key, just to make sure they're landing right, they're put their hands in, like, because I feel like the techniques that we have in parkour are sort of arbitrary, because I mean it's fairly general movement what we do, but there are like certain techniques that just prove themselves to be safer and better, like for your health, and I like to really make sure that people can understand that it's about their joints, and that to get them an understanding of, you need this to be safe, but you can play also with the movements. They're not set. You don't have to do them like this.
Agreed.
Okay. Cool. All right, then something that we talked a little bit about when we spoke the last time was about setting expectations.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really big one, because when people come in, they will have certain expectations towards you, and you will also have certain expectations towards them as students, and also what you want to teach them. And I think making that clear from the very first day is really key. What would be a way for you, like how do you set expectations for like a new group of people, like for new people coming in, but also regularly in your classes?
Well, I say for me, I think that I'm a big believer in screening people, and giving someone a basic rundown of what the kinds of things they're going to get into. So I'm also a big believer not only in the in screening your athletes, but also in intros. So introduction classes and that sort of thing, to be able to get the people that are, you know what, it's just a good idea for everybody. It's a good idea. It's a good idea for everyone, from advanced students to students that just people who are fit, people who have done parkour before and are experienced, people who haven't got off the couch in 20 years. It doesn't matter who you are. Intro to you and a set intro to you and the way you teach, what you teach, how you teach it, and the discipline as a whole, because there are a lot of factors that you can address, and a lot of information that you can get, and a lot of information that your athletes can get. Just a set intro of how things are done. And if you can use that intro to screen your clients, to be able to separate out who's at what level, it goes even better. So yeah, that would be number one thing, is just have a set intro that allows that's an introduction to you, an introduction to the facility or the area that you're training in. It's an introduction for you to your clients, and everything else, and the way you teach, how you teach, what you teach, yada yada yada.
What kind of screens do you do? Yeah.
I like to do, for me, the first kinds of screens that I like to do are mobility screens. So just clearing people for, like, does somebody have the hip mobility to go down into a deep squat?
Yeah.
Okay. That's one of the very first things that I try and get people to do, is to go down into a deep squat. And not only is it hip mobility, but it's hip mobility. Do they have the basic structure of their knees to be able to bend that deeply? Do they have mobility in their ankles to be able to go down, to be able to squat that low? Is there something wrong with their thoracic spine that they're not able to, that they're constantly hunched over and they're just immediately try and fall backwards when they go down into the squat? So that's one thing. The next thing is, how are their handstands? All right. So, are they nervous about going up into handstands? Can they hold a handstand again without using the wall? Do they have to walk themselves up the wall when they walk? With their torsos facing the wall, they're going to walk themselves up. Those two for parkour, those two screens will give you a lot of information about what they're capable of doing, their physical, just their overall physical prowess. And it's not that I like go up and say, okay, everybody go into a handstand. It's like, no, you walk them into it nice and slow. How is their ground Kong? Okay, that gives you a huge amount of information as well. And in fact, if you do the ground Kong, if you tell them to try and do the ground Kong before they do the handstands, it'll give you more of an idea of what they're getting ready to do in their handstands. If you give them quadrupedal movement before you give them the ground Kong, it gives you even more information. So it's a progression. It's a progression of what people would be capable of in a regular progression, and you can also use that as a screen to screen your clients. So quadruped movement with the deep squat, you move them onto the ground Kong. From the ground Kong, you move them into handstands, and you move them then to broad jumps. From there, you move them from those two to precision jumps into vaults. And teach them as well as you can use them to screen your clients.
Yeah, Martin basically agrees with you in the chat. He also talks about functional movement screens. So also things like balancing and hanging. So checking for basic coordination, strength. Yeah. So
yeah,
I think
without a doubt.
Yeah, I think that's all a really good idea. So for me, it usually works like this. I have completely new groups every couple of times. So it's not often that new people come into the group. So it's fairly easy for me just to design the whole first session just to check all these things that you just mentioned. So during the warm-up, I check how their squats are, how their balance is, how their quadrupedal movement is, how they can coordinate. And then also then teach them some basic landings and then see how their broad jump is and what I have to work on. And then I can, from these things, you can already get quite a good sense of how people have been moving, what sort of issues they have, that sort of thing. Martin also says I first let them tell me what they know of parkour. So getting an understanding what they understand as parkour and what you understand as parkour. Because I literally have people come to me and ask me, are we gonna go on rooftops on the end of this course? I was like, no, with me we'll never do that.
No, we're not.
For 10 years. It's your thing, but not my responsibility. But
no,
I mean, the problem continues to be the public image of parkour.
Right.
And I think we have a responsibility of getting people to understand what it actually is that we do.
Right.
And why. Most importantly, why. And I think, having what you said, like having a clear and set introduction to your own work is a really good way to first think about it yourself. Like, what am I actually doing? What do I want people to experience and know and get to know through my teaching? And then saying that to people, like, we are going to do a lot of quadrupedal movement. It's going to be really exhausting, but it's going to be really, really good for you because this and this and this and this.
Right. Yeah, and I think that Martin brought up a good point about letting them know. Or wait, was it Martin or was it you? I can't remember.
It doesn't
Martin.
Matter. Well,
he brought up a good point about letting them tell you what they already know about parkour, and that's one of the things. That's actually one of the more entertaining things that I did in my intros was ask. Okay, so you're here to learn about parkour. Great. What is it?
Yeah.
And have everybody going, and just go, okay, so I haven't received a wrong answer to this question. So whatever you come up with, just go for it. And that usually opened up and got everybody kind of loosened up a little bit and got, okay. So here's what it is. And it's actually one of the more entertaining answers that I got at one point was, I think the girl was about 10 years old, and she said, it's dancing everywhere all the time.
That's awesome. That is so cool.
That was one of the most entertaining answers that I've ever gotten. One of the funniest answers that I got really often is, what is parkour? And they would say, parkour is free running. I'm like, okay, so what is free running? It's like, okay, not a wrong answer, but if you is,
that's awesome.
Yeah, so, but it also really helps to, especially if you do it in the beginning, it really helps to get the class just kind of like, okay, get loose. Nobody knows anything. Nobody's extremely experienced in this class. It's not gonna be a big thing if I mess something up. So it really helps set the tone of the class.
Yeah, I think that's another thing that I did not do in the beginning too much. I think I was focusing too much on teaching technique and not so much on getting the group together, getting a good like social dynamic going. Just that was sort of happening by accident, and then I realized how important it actually is just to build a little tribe that wants to move together.
Yes.
I like to do that with just exercises that people have to do in pairs or in groups of 3 or 4, like balancing. We play the floor is lava a lot, but like holding on to each other as a group. So it has like the survival element as a group, and I think it bonds people together really well. And
agreed.
Yeah, that's just some. I think because a lot of the parkour exercises are very individual, like everyone just does their thing. So getting people to interact with each other I think it's a good idea.
Agreed.
Okay. Someone with a name that I will not pronounce asked in the chat, in addition, so how do you adjust your class to stay engaging for people who don't pass your screens? And in addition to that, how do you deal with a large mobility strength skill gap in your class?
You want to address that one first?
Oh yeah, sure. So I think everyone will pass the screen, just at different levels. Just either you decide to have everyone either you segregate by skill and have them in different, like in your beginners, intermediate, and advanced courses, or you just have them in one big group. And then I just try to give a lot of different progressions and regressions to every movement. So I will let them know if we are working on the Kong, we will all start with the lowest progression, like the ground Kong or whatever, just basically whatever I think is the lowest progression that everyone can do. We will start there, then we will start working our way up. With the Kong, it will have some that will come fairly late in the classes, but then we start working our way up, and I say, if you notice that you are afraid to go for the next step, or if it just doesn't feel right, don't hesitate just to stay on the level before to really get comfortable with the movement.
Right.
And so I just try to keep it engaging that way. So I have a lot of different regressions, but not making them feel, oh, this is the goal, you have to get here. But we're all working on our levels. We're all working on our own challenges and limits. And yeah.
I couldn't have put it better myself. That's exactly what I would have said.
Perfect. Okay. The guy's name is Rob, by the way. He just has a weird YouTube.
Okay.
All right. So we talked about setting expectations, I think, enough. Is there anything that you want to add still to that?
No, good to go.
Cool. Then I think another big issue, just a thing that needs to be thought about, is safety. Especially in the beginning, and for most people that did not start out with a coach on themselves. I mean, I just taught it to myself and with my friends. And as a 15-year-old boy, we were not putting that much attention to safety, to be honest, in the beginning.
What?
Yeah.
Say it ain't so.
But I think, so safety for me usually starts with telling people that they're responsible for themselves in my classes. That whatever they choose to do, they do because they decide to do it. If I tell them to do something that they're not comfortable with, they need to be able to stop themselves.
Agreed.
Yeah. What are the things?
I usually tell people that I am not a drill instructor. I am a guide. I am not a drill instructor. If I ask you to do something and you are not, you don't think you're ready for it, just say something. You don't have to do it. Conversely, if I tell you to do something and you think, oh, this is nothing, and I'm not giving you enough advanced stuff, ask, and I will. I'll be happy to look at your movement and say whether or not you're ready for the next step up, and if you are ready for the next step up, I'll give you the next step up. There's always somewhere else to go.
Yeah. How do you go about spotting? Like, do you spot your students, or do you give them advice on how to do it with each other?
I usually don't spot my students, and that's not to say that I won't spot my students. It's that I usually try to use progressions so that my students don't need to have a spotter. And sometimes that causes some problems with people wanting to go faster and get more out of their time, more out of their practice and whatnot. But I find it's easier on me as the trainer, and it tends to be easier on the majority of students to have progressions so that you don't need to spot your students, rather than spotting your students and slowing down the class or something like that in order to get somebody to advance even faster. Spotting is a good technique, and I will do it for things like teaching back tucks and front tucks and like front handsprings and stuff like that. But for the most part, with the strictly parkour moves, spotting it all, and I tend to just use the progressions.
Yeah. The only time I really use spotting in my classes is with arm jumps, because I teach all my classes outside, and the spot where we do arm jumps is like concrete walls with concrete floor.
Yeah. Okay. In that case, without a doubt, yeah, you definitely want to spot. And if you don't have mats, you're doing some high flying stuff, yeah, spot your students. But I've always taught with mats and just the progressions, just to be able to nice slow increments to the point where they don't even feel the need for a spotter. Exactly.
Yeah, and what I usually do exactly in that moment where we start doing arm jumps, I let them know that most of the injuries happen when you don't pay 100% attention. That it's not the big jumps that will hurt you, but like the small fuck up that you didn't expect. And same goes for spotting. Someone does a jump 15 times. You put your hands in your pocket and he slips and slices his head open.
Yeah. Yeah. There's always that kind of thing that happens. It's and that when that happens, it's a pain. But at the same time, I mean, you got to accept a little bit, at least a little bit of risk with it.
Yeah.
As the trainer and the student, you're accepting at least a little bit of risk with it. So there's always that aspect of it. I mean, I had a lot of injuries in the gym that were just freak things.
Yeah.
Like I had one advanced student do a tic tac, and it wasn't even a big tic tac. It was a tiny tic tac. Landed on foot on the top of one of the vault boxes, and his ankle just went bloop, down, spiral fracture of the fibula, broke the bottom of his tibia and severed every single ligament between his ankle and his tibia. And it wasn't even this big thing. He just kind of jumped, landed, and his ankle went, and that was it. It was amazing.
Yeah.
But
yeah, of course, those things just happen.
Yeah.
But for me, it's really important to let them know that they should just pay 100% attention for every attempt that they do.
Yeah, focus on every single move. Every single move you do is meaningful. Every single time you mess something up, that's meaningful too. It's you only ever failed. You can mess something up, but if you learned something from it, you didn't fail.
That's a really good point of establishing like a mistake-friendly culture in your classes, I think.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. You have to. I mean, parkour, in my opinion, parkour is a sport failure. It's like you're going to fail. That's just the end of it. But in failing, you can learn so much really, really fast as long as you just learn something from failing. If you learn something from your failure, you didn't fail.
Yeah, and I think that's something that you should say early on in people's parkour. How do you say that? When they start doing parkour, you should let them know that either you can tell it like this, or I assume there are more elegant ways to do this than just to say it to them, but to let them know that mistakes are good for you, that they're learning opportunities, and not to get discouraged by them, but to get excited about failing because they will be able to learn in that moment.
Agreed.
All right. We have so it's 5 more minutes until it's 8 to 9 already. We have like a little bit more time because we started later.
I got a little time.
Cool. Okay, then let's go for like 10 minutes more, I would say. Then we have an hour.
That's fine.
So we talked a little bit about common mistakes and how to set expectations. Now we talked a little bit about safety. Trying to think if there's anything else that I do to make sure that all my students are safe.
Start at the ground. Teach them how to fall.
Teach them how to fall. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, that's the with in any group that you're teaching parkour to. Teach them the basics of how to fall. And in my humble opinion, the teaching and in my humble opinion, as well as most of the other parkour coaches that I've ever talked to, teaching someone how to fall begins with getting them on the ground in the first place. You get them on the ground, you teach them how to get up.
Yeah.
Ground in multiple different ways. You're also inherently teaching them how to fall.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think the discussion that we had like 1 or 2 months ago about falling was very illuminating about this, and I think
was that with Brandy?
Yeah, with Brandy.
Yeah, that was really good.
Yeah, so that's a good thing to just start beginners on the ground and get them comfortable with the ground and comfortable with falling safely. Also, just it should be common knowledge, but warm up your students really well.
Oh yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. You have to. If you're going for an hour class, or hell, if you're only going for a 45-minute class, you're doing at least a 10 to 15 minute warm up without question. If you're teaching older clientele, you're doing a 15 minutes bare minimum, maybe 20 minutes of warm up. It's just, if you don't do it, you're asking for trouble.
Yeah, so maybe let's, so there's a lot that I still want to get into, and I think we should just save it for another conversation. So maybe let's just talk really specific ways to warm up and what it should accomplish. Because I think it's something that, I mean, you can do a lot in or at least for me, the warm-ups are usually a time when I can do a lot of things with my students. So I usually start out quite simply just with getting their heart rate up, either by running or maybe even a little bit of sprinting or just jumping on, just getting ready. And then, so my basic warm-up is just to get every rotate every joint through all the possible ranges of motion. Found that to be quite effective.
Yes.
And then I also usually like to do some sort of either a little game in pairs. We talked about that earlier, just for the bonding, or I almost always do some sort of balance as like a focus exercise to get them really like, I'm here now, ready to train. I'm like, to get them in the moment, really inside their body. Balance usually really works really well for that.
Agreed. I also would add getting them into a silly position. Getting them into a silly position. So this is only something that I did toward the end of my toward the end of the life of my gym. I would, in the warm up, I would ask them to do something like I don't know, just rolling all the way backwards and putting their feet over top of their heads. So if they're laying down on the ground, put their feet over their heads and touch it to the ground behind them, and do that a couple of times, and have the relatively new people going, why are we doing this? And after they get comfortable doing something that seems just silly like that, nothing else in the class seems weird. And and just get them comfortable in their own skins, as well as get their heart rates up, warm up their joints, that sort of thing. And it's doing the game in the beginning is great.
Yeah. So one that I really like is so there's a couple of different games that I play. One is where you have a little just a stick between your fingers. One person is holding it like this, like between their fingers. The other is holding their hand over the stick, right, hovering over it, and the other person releases the stick, and the other one has to catch it. And just things like this, or standing up on something, throwing a ball to each other.
Right.
Balancing on one leg, pushing each other, trying to get the other one out of balance.
Yeah, those are all great. I like holding like a 5 foot long stick between two people and having them balance on a rail, and they have to try and force each other off.
Nice. Yeah. That's a good one. Yeah, and even you can, what I did that on a like waist high obstacle. I mean, that was the last part of the warm up, and so if they fall, and also with advanced students, so if they fall, they have to adjust their position in the air to land well. It's a very chaotic way to fall, because you cannot really predict which way you're going.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, I think other things. I mean, we didn't really say it yet, but for people that don't know, if you don't warm up, you will get injured. There's just no way around it. And I see a lot of, especially young people, just skipping their warm-ups. And I mean, if you're practicing for yourself, it's your own responsibility. But with students, you cannot really skip it. And there are a lot of ways to make it creatively. I would encourage everyone just to take a lot of classes in different fields, like in different sports, because everyone is doing it differently.
I couldn't agree more. That one of the things that will help you as a coach is engaging in other disciplines. I think it's a huge mistake to stay with one discipline and one discipline only. Go into dance, go into gymnastics, go into martial arts, go into team sports, go into get into juggling, ride a unicycle, learn to ride a unicycle, pick up lyra, pick up aerial silks, pick up circus arts, whatever you can get your hands on. It will make you better at virtually everything else that you do, and not only make you better at the actual discipline that you're engaging in, but make you a better coach, because you're going to need to be coached through whatever discipline it is. And in doing that, you're going to pick up a lot of different techniques to teach other people different movements. So it's that is, in my humble opinion, essential. And it's one of the reasons that I'm at least a decent coach, if not a good coach, is because I've done 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I've done 8. I've been an instructor or a teacher or a coach or whatever in at least 6 to 8 other disciplines, depending on your definition of a discipline. So and I've played multiple sports and all that kind of thing, and so much from each and every single one of them. You just pick up as much as you can, diversify.
Absolutely, yeah. And also because in parkour, there's not really much of a, there are some certifications that we have, but for example, here in Germany, it's really hard to get to any of them. And yeah, I think for me, it was one of the, I learned the most whenever I went to coaches outside of parkour, because from the people that I knew that were teaching parkour around me, I could pick up little bits and pieces here and there, but the most knowledge just I gathered from other disciplines. Yeah. What so because we're on the topic of this, like, what other ways do you see in educating yourself as a parkour coach other than engaging in other disciplines?
Travel.
Travel
and go and talk to other parkour coaches. Go talk to other parkour coaches about what they see in their students, what they call their moves will tell you different things about different areas and the way that they teach those things. Look at different progressions, different sets of progressions that people will give their students. Being around other coaches will help you learn how to coach. And blogs, videos, subscribe to them. I follow.
Yeah, go ahead. Do you have a couple
Pardon?
of good ones that you could mention?
One of my favorites is Eric Cressy. Eric Cressy is he's a baseball. He's specific to baseball, but he gives a lot of really good, really detailed ways to screen your client and or correct imbalances or figure out, different detriments. Some of it's not going to apply to parkour, but I would even suggest you check those out just to be able to have the knowledge. Tap Brothers really cool for different drills. Those guys are parkour specific, and too many people know the Tap Brothers to count, so I don't need to give too much of an intro there. Talking about different people, Tim Ferriss. Tim Ferriss is not a trainer, he's not a coach or anything else, but he has really great podcasts, and sometimes he does have really good trainers and really good coaches that he gets into. Kelly Starrett. Kelly Starrett is another of my favorites. He's really good. Brian Ford and his book. It's a fantastic resource.
Yeah.
That's the ones I can get off the top of my head. I mean, I could go into my search history here and find some more, but I'll leave it there for right now.
That's something that we can do in the Facebook group. Just gather some links and names to people where you can go and get like just information on coaching and strength training and conditioning, this sort of thing.
Right.
I would also definitely point. I cannot really think of a good blog or a specific name to point people towards, but I think also to look into different sorts of dance, because the teaching there is very because it's not so much focused on performance, but I don't know, I guess expression would be the thing, because I teach parkour in a non-competitive way, so I'm not really interested in getting people better, so to speak, but teaching them, I don't know, the sort of underlying values and philosophies of parkour along the moves. And I think dance is a really good way to get a sense of more creative techniques in teaching, I think, for me at least.
Right. Yeah, agreed.
All right. Cool. So we talked for an hour now. Is there anything that you would like to add to this conversation so far?
No, except for the fact that I've enjoyed every time that I've been able to come on, and even now, and even when it's just been you and me, I'm you and me and the commenters. I'm always happy to be here.
Nice. All right. Oh yeah, I missed a lot of comments.
Oh no, gosh, we've been talking too much. Jeez.
No, they were kind of stuck, and now we're all piling up now. Sorry, guys.
Oh dear.
Oops. All right. Well, we will not come to them now anymore. But yeah, I have to see how we sort out the technical difficulties. Maybe we use different software or something. But I'll look into that.
Yeah. Get the tech figured out so we can have more people.
Yeah. All right, man. Adam, it's been a lot of fun. I think we covered a lot of ground. And yeah, it was fun. Thank you.
Sounds good, man. Yep. Have a good one.
All right. See you soon.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye.